Chapter 4. Jack gives Stoick a heart attack. Berk was in disarray. Astrid and the rest of the group shoot each other looks as they watch Hiccup up by Stoick right at the head of the table, at the front of the chaos erupting around them. The entire town is crowded into the great hall. The room is almost half empty, though, and the meager numbers present only help to put people more on edge. One of Berk's allied tribes to the south had sent word a few days earlier asking for aid. A series of snowstorms had converged, swirling into a beast that ravaged nearly the entire lower archipelago for weeks on end. Berk was situated right at the northern tip of the behemoth, well out of the way of its teeth, so to speak. And yet the damage was still extensive. One of their storehouses took the brunt from the storm, causing them to lose a good chunk of their spare grain supply. Once the weather cleared, everyone on Berk had gotten quickly into their long-established cleanup routines. There wasn't much they could do but rebuild and pray against another cold front like that hitting their shores. Hiccup had apparently spent nearly an entire day in meetings with Gothi and other village members, trying to explain that these storms weren't Jack and that the spirit couldn't simply stop them. The shrine still became filled with desperate wooden carvings and braided necklaces, almost begging for appeasement. It didn't help that they were low enough on supplies that they couldn't give their usual offerings, making people even more jittery that their patron would become angered. Jack himself had in actuality started steadfastly refusing any food offered to him, either shoved by Hiccup or Astrid herself. She had managed to sneak a cookie into one of its pockets one day, only to find it wrapped up in leather on her windowsill that same night. It was during the end of their cleanup that they received the letter. The message told the fate of those not lucky enough to be on the outskirts of the raging storm. Whole homes had been torn straight from the foundations, men and women frozen to the ground come morning, some still missing. They asked for hands from Berk to aid in rebuilding, calling on Berk's good relations with their tribe. Before the alliance between dragons and men, Berk was well known in the archipelago for being on the front lines in terms of the war with the beasts. No other clan had the nearly weekly raids like Berk, and thus no other clan had warriors trained for dragon killing like Berk either. They were the only island set so close to Helheim's Gate and to what came to be known as the Red Death's Nest. Months after taking down the Red Death, Hiccup and Fishlegs had mapped out a range of influence of the Queen based off the species of dragons found in the freed horde, part of which split off and came to live on Berk. The border of that influence stretched right across the sea, and Astrid had watched as Hiccup and Fishlegs drew that line right across Berk, her range of influence swallowing their isle right on the southern border. It was fascinating, if terrifying, to study such a thing and know it was so close to them this whole time. They had grown up a day's flight away from that devil, its siren call echoing on their deaf ears. There were many ways in which Berk had shaped its people. Some, however, are more surprising than others. After the Red Death, with Berk's attention now not used entirely on the struggle for survival, the neighboring tribes soon found other quirks of its people. One such thing being their uncanny efficiency in construction. Word of mouth spread fast, and soon not only were Berkians known for their dragon riders, but also for their ability in architecture. Hire 3 Berkians and they'll have your house walled and furnished in 4 days. Apparently, that kind of speed usually takes more than twice as many men. Astrid never gave it much thought. Buildings burned down all the time growing up. It was only natural that people knew how to build them back up again before they froze to death. This efficiency only tripled with the newly added draconian workforce. Hiccup had said to her many times that it's almost comedic how Berk, once known for the stubbornness and ruthlessness in battle, is now known for their exotic pets and expertise in home construction. So a message begging for Berk's aid in reconstruction wasn't out of the ordinary. Stoick had read their letter, saw the desperation between the lines, for shelter to be made before the next front hit, and reacted in kind.
"Berk shall honor our long-standing goodwill. Any free ants available, meet in the square,"
he had shouted to the village during the announcement. The town had cheered in kind, and so half of Berk's dragons and men went sailing or riding off towards their southern neighbors. It had lifted everyone's spirits at first, showing Berk's strength to their allies. It didn't help the situation now, though.
"Why did we have to send half the village away again? We could have sent,
10 men, and everyone would have been happy, Snotlout grumbles. Astrid elbows him, but can't find it in herself to put much muster behind it. She secretly agrees. Hiccup had been out flying when he spotted 10 ships in tight formation sailing straight for Berkian waters. They shot at him the moment he got in range, a nick on his shoulder and a half-incinerated bola still wrapped around Toothless's foot to show for their efforts in diplomacy. It's a raid, and the raiding party is only about an hour from Berk's shorelines. It's painfully obvious the whole thing was a setup, too. Astrid doesn't know if their so-called allies are in on the plan, but either way, the end result is the same. The ships coming know they're only a fraction of their numbers and had gathered all their men to take advantage of the delicate situation. She wants to fly out there with Stormfly and show them what Berk at half power can do to their ships. It's a sentiment that's shared, even if only Astrid can see how illogical it would be in practice.
Why can't we just send the riders out to them? What good are they if they can't even defend against our enemies?
Spitloud barks. Small groups of voices raise in agreement. The riders exchange looks at that. Snotlout pinches the bridge of his nose. Gods, you ride a dragon, Dad. How do you not get this? He grumbles. Fishlegs pats him on the back. Astrid watches as Hiccup mirrors Snotlout's position at the head of the table.
As I said before, Spitloud, that would basically be suicide. They're in tight formation with anti-dragon defenses lining every deck space I could spot. I saw long-range chain bola shooters too. With our numbers, we could be down before we even got in range to fire on their ships.
What are we supposed to do? Just let them come to our shores?
A voice calls from the back. Murmurs erupt throughout the room, people starting to drown each other out in the throng of voices.
We will defend our home,
Stoick bellows, quieting the rising noise.
Their dragon defenses lay on their ships. They cannot hide behind them forever.
They wouldn't need to,
a voice shouts out.
They have 10 ships worth of warriors. Once they get ashore, we're doomed.
We still have Berk's defenses,
Stoick argues, eyes slicing through the crowd. He slams a hand down on the map laid out before them.
Our cliffs will force them to come through our docks or track up the beach paths along the eastern side. They'll be bottlenecked the whole way to the village.
What about range attacks from their ships to prevent us from blocking the path?
We have our catapults.
We'll be close enough to Berk at that point to deploy our riders as well,
Hiccup pipes up.
But will that be enough?
Astrid and Ruffnut look at each other as more and more villagers dogpile questions onto Hiccup and Stoick. Stoick leans against the table and replies to each one head-on. Hiccup... Astrid can see Hiccup buckling a bit from the onslaught. Their group stays quiet, looking on at the way Hiccup curls into himself, rubbing his forehead as his eyes skitter around the map. Astrid knows that look. He's not confident in their plan, but what other choice do they have?
The longer we stand here arguing, the less time we have to set up our defenses,
Astrid murmurs, looking over the crowd.
Yeah, tell that to them,
Toughnut grumbles, fiddling with his mace. Hiccup suddenly stills, hands planted on the table. It takes Astrid a moment to notice, but once she does, she taps Fishleg's arm, and they turn to watch. Stoick's too busy trying to quell down the near mob after another comment by Spitloud, and so doesn't see how Hiccup's eyes widen. He murmurs quietly to himself, eyes darting around the map. He says something, standing up a bit straighter. It's too quiet for any of them to hear except for Stoick. Stoick himself stops mid-sentence and looks over at Hiccup like he's grown a second head. He slowly asks for Hiccup to repeat himself.
"We can call on Jack,"
Hiccup says again, voice louder. His eyes are still glued to the map, somewhere 3 steps ahead, plans whirling into creation in his mind.
Your boy gets a new title and thinks he can commune with the gods, Stoick. This is not the time for one of his ideas, Spitloud spits out. My son is the head of our main line of defense, Spitloud, and technically your superior as a rider, Stoick growls. Astrid can't help but join in when everyone snickers at that. Stoick sighs, tilting his head towards Hiccup. He is right, though, Hiccup. We do not have the time to put ourselves in the hands of uncertainty.
"It's not uncertain, Dad. He can help. He would save us a lot of trouble,"
Hiccup argues.
The time and payment needed for summoning and requesting aid is beyond what we can do right now, son.
Hiccup takes a step forward, turning towards Stoick fully.
We don't need payment, Dad, and we don't need to do some weird summoning ritual. I'll just call him over.
He thinks he can just call upon the Vetir and it'll appear. I will not have my life be in debt to the being.
Voices cry out, stacking on one another.
Hiccup, Stoick says, voice straining. We do not have time to argue this.
This could save the village.
Hiccup, we will discuss this later.
What part of this aren't you understand?
Stop!
Stoick booms, whipping on Hiccup. Astrid stares, silenced, along with the rest of the group, as they watch the two men stare each other down. Stoick is like a mountain, looming, nearly folded in half over Hiccup. Astrid will never know how he does it, but Hiccup doesn't back down from the glare. He stares up defiant, face twisting in annoyance.
That's it,
Hiccup grumbles, head tilting towards the ceiling.
Wind, I need Jack's help. Berk needs Jack's help. Please,
he yells out. The entire room goes dead silent. The sound of shuffling feet is the only thing that can be heard outside the whining wind echoing behind the closed doors. A few beats pass, and then the room erupts into laughter. Astrid watches everyone slap each other's backs and cackle at Hiccup, mouth thin.
They're so going to freak out when he shows up,
Ruffnut says, grinning.
This isn't going to end well,
Fishlegs whines, curling in a bit on himself.
Yeah, well, we're all fucked anyways. Might as well get the gods involved.
Snotlout bites, leaning against the wall. Astrid stays silent, eyes trained on Hiccup. He's slumping a bit over the table, but more to rub at his forehead than in embarrassment. He looks over her way, and she raises an eyebrow in question. He shrugs his shoulder, a hidden little smile quirking. All right, he isn't too badly bothered by being the laughingstock of the village meeting then. Astrid doesn't know about this whole screaming Jack's name to the sky strategy, but if the man can find them in the middle of the sea on some random boat, then she has no doubt he can hear Hiccup's plea wherever he is. She jerks her head towards the map. What's his grand plan? His eyes start over, and then he wobbles his hand like he's flying before mirroring a boat. She squints at him, and he winks before looking back down at the map, eyebrows drawn together in concentration. Flying wind? Wind and boat. What? Wind? Oh! Astrid gasps, and the riders turn to give her confused looks. The wind drives the boats, she says, a wide grin spreading on her face. Yeah, it sure does, Snotlout says, hesitantly exchanging looks. Astrid snorts before kicking the back of his knee, dropping him to the floor. He goes down with a squawk. Astrid turns back towards the action. Stoick is still responding to the piling comments coming from the jittery crowd. Spitelout's feeding on the fire from Stoick's other side isn't helping matters. Hiccup is thoroughly ignoring all of them at this point, notebook out and writing down whatever is flashing behind his eyes. Suddenly, the front doors get slammed open, a howling wind whipping into the room. Everyone snaps around to the sound of the doors hitting the wall. Those doors were nearly as big as the building, built out of the thickest tree trunks of their aisle. Hiccup could barely open them enough to squeeze through as a kid. They do not yield easily. A couple Vikings rush over to force the doors closed, and the room calms again. It's around the same time as everyone else that Astrid notices the wind still blowing, even with the closed entryway. Murmurings pick up, and Astrid stands a bit straighter, peeking over shoulders towards the entrance. A bundle of snowflakes twirls from the doorway, swirling and dipping on some unknown breeze towards the front of the room. The crowd parts for the little swatch of snow, people scratching their beards in confusion. The crowd closes the gap to form a half circle around the phenomenon. The bundle twirls in a circle in the center of the room, and then the breeze twitches upwards, and two individual flakes stop mid-air. They look frozen, hovering. The crowd gasps, leaning in to watch. Astrid squints, and in front of her those two flakes become eyes. Well, he certainly chose a dramatic entrance. Jack materializes slowly, almost hesitantly. First the face, white hair curling around an invisible finger before falling onto a head, powdered snow dusting the floor in its wake. Then the rest of his body comes shimmering into existence, cloak rippling behind him before draping itself over his shoulders. Glinting jewels and metals adorn his neck, almost in a wreath, overlain by a thin layer of frost, glimmering like diamond dust. The rich dyes in his clothes are deep, exaggerating the contrast with his white hair and pale skin, and Astrid suddenly remembers all the free time Hiccup used to have, how he spent one winter holed up and convinced he could become a tailor, if not a dragon killer. She sees those months now spread out in the elegant embroidery dancing around Jack's shirt sleeves. He dresses him up like something to be worshipped. She wonders if Jack knows he kind of is, in his own way, by the hands that made those clothes. By the bracelets and small wrappings around his wrists and hands adorned in stones and fairy bells, solid silver to glint against the firelight. Those that can't fit on his arms and neck are wrapped delicately around his staff, the crook laden in chimes and dangling carved charms. Once he fully forms, his bare feet touch the floor like his body has finally given weight. His expression is blank, face passive. Not the laughter greeting them at the edge, not the casual entrances sneaking into rooms to be tackled by Toothless. Not cold, but not the warmth she's used to seeing, the kind brought by familiarity. Astrid has never seen him materialize in front of her before. He's always flying down from somewhere, barking out some joke that has her forgetting just who is before her. Is this the man that Hiccup found in that blizzard? He looks otherworldly. All activity in the hall comes screeching to a halt. Everyone stares, shell-shocked, as Jack tilts his head around the room, looking for someone. Looking for Hiccup, no doubt. Jack finds him, and Astrid sees his chest dip minutely, a small sigh of relief slipping silently from his lips. He goes to take a step forward. He pauses, though, teetering, when Gothi comes stumbling out of the crowd in front of him. That's the fastest Astrid thinks she's ever seen the woman move. She hobbles a few steps before carefully kneeling upon the ground, head pressed to her staff. The rest of the room quickly follows. Astrid and the riders glance at each other, wavering. She had held an axe to the man's throat before. She showed him her hut. She snuck him pumpkin pie only a month ago. He was not someone they needed to kneel to. Some of the villagers turn back to glare at them, and Astrid hesitates another second before kneeling as well, the rest of her friends not far behind.
"Can't believe I'm kneeling to a man who made a snowman army in my room," Snotlout grumbles. "I can't believe the chief looks terrified of a man who made a snowman army in your room," Tough Nut mumbled slowly in reply. Astrid looks up to the head of the table. Stoick is almost swaying on his feet, eyes blown wide, face pale. He takes a deep breath, shoulders a strong line once again, before beginning to make his way over to Gothi. "Dash!" Hiccup starts, rolling his eyes, going to step forward as well. Stoick whips around. Astrid can't see what look he gives Hiccup, but it has him frowning. He goes to open his mouth again, and Stoick grabs both his shoulders, shoving him to his knees. "Stay here,"
She can hear Stoick hiss. She's pretty sure the entire room could hear a pin drop at this point. Astrid glances at Jack, who seems to have been watching the whole interaction too. His eyes narrow, mouth pulling into something a bit stonier, a bit less friendly. Little ice shards sprout up in a ring around his feet, and those at the front of the circle flinch. Gothi begins to shake from her position. Stoick makes his way to the front and stops beside Gothi. He holds out a hand, gently helping her to his feet, before kneeling as well. His eyes are trained on the floor, following the runes that Gothi traces slowly over the wood.
"Honorable Lord Jack, Berk welcomes you to her great hall. We give thanks for your heed to the call of council."
His voice intones slowly. He takes a shaky breath as Gothi pauses. She starts a few runes before stopping, then slowly begins tracing again.
"We give our greatest apologies for the disrespect offered to you. Your summoning was made without the proper gifts to beseech your counsel. All we seek is forgiveness for the slight. We will give the proper compensation as soon as possible."
Astrid watches as Stoick chances a glance at Jack. His strained face, mouth not quite a frown, but edging on annoyed, and the crackling shards crumbling around his feet do not make for a promising look. Stoick quickly looks back to the floor. Astrid can see him twitch. Hiccup is standing up again and leaning against the table with his head in his hands, grumbling to himself. Astrid can't make out what he's saying, but it sounds annoyed at least, the rumblings quietly washing over the deathly silent crowd. He at least has the self-preservation not to speak up again, Astrid muses. She's pretty sure Stoick would actually kill him if he did that. Jack looks between Stoick, Gothy, and Hiccup. Astrid watches as Stoick and Gothy tense when the silence stretches. The room watches with bated breath. Jack, without a word, turns and walks towards the table. Stoick whips his head to follow him, mouth hanging slightly open. Everyone in the room watches, except for Hiccup, too absorbed in his own grumbling to notice the approaching figure. Jack pauses at the table a second before floating up, meandering his way over the top, frost spurting out over the wood. Astrid chances another glance back at Stoick. He looks... God, she almost feels bad for how he looks. His face is twisted up as he watches Jack approach Hiccup. It's like he's watching his son's death in slow motion. Jack gently toes the map out of the way before walking right up in front of Hiccup's bowed form. He squats, staff leaning forward to rap lightly against his head. Hiccup startles before flopping his hands onto the table, looking up with a rueful smile. Jack snorts. "Hey, Hick," he says, warm voice carrying. Stoick slowly stands, turning around.
"Hi, Jack,"
Hiccup murmurs.
"Sorry for calling on you like this."
"Don't be," Jack says, resolute. "How can I help?" Hiccup heaves a sigh, holding out a hand. Jack takes it, drifting over his shoulder. Hiccup flattens out the map again and begins explaining the situation, the rest of the room forgotten. Well, they're gone to the world. Astrid rolls her eyes, getting loudly back on her feet. The rest of the room pauses before taking her cue, everyone shuffling hesitantly off their knees. Stoick looks on with furrowed brows, frazzled, as Jack reclines in the air above Hiccup like he's in a lounge chair. Astrid watches as he leans an elbow on Hiccup's head, humming thoughtfully to something the man said. Hiccup doesn't even react, other than to brush off the snow that gets jostled onto his shoulder from the action. She swears to Odin Hiccup's going to give Stoick the village record for number of heart murmurs. First, he comes home with a pet dragon, and now the chief is cautiously shuffling back to the head of the table, while his son happily converses with a spiritual anomaly in a way that screams they had been hanging out regularly for months.
"With how close they are, even with the plan of attack we have, our dragons and our defenses, they have a good chance of overwhelming us just from their anti-dragon weapons and numbers alone,"
Hiccup says, pointing out the different access points from the invaders' predicted landing areas. Jack rubs his chin. "All right, so how can I help? Do you guys want a storm to drive them off?"
"No!"
Hiccup shouts, along with half the villagers in the room, Stoick and the rest of the riders. Jack startled at the response.
"We already got hit hard by the tail of one. Our storehouses can't take another blizzard like that,"
Hiccup says.
"I actually wanted to ask for some help with the winds."
"The wind?" Jack leans over Hiccup's shoulder, squinting at the map. "What, blow them off the cliffs?"
"I was thinking more delaying them from reaching the cliffs in the first place,"
Hiccup says, standing up straight, crossing his arms.
"If you can make sure the ships don't reach us until nightfall, I think Berk can get enough traps set up around here to make any invasion near impossible. Also, the darkness will make it harder for the anti-dragon defenses. We'll have stealth on our side."
Jack floats down to squat on the table next to the map. "Oh, I think the wind will be up for that," he says, smirking at Hiccup. Jack then looks up at the crowd before him, almost as if remembering that they were there. Everyone shuffles from the eye contact, some almost flinching. He skims over the crowd until finally finding the riders hidden in the back. He gives them all a small smile. Astrid gives one back before inclining her head towards the audience before him. This is his first impression on these people. He needs to make it count. Jack seems to understand because he nods minutely before standing to his full height, staff landing on the table with a thunk, frost spurting and dancing sparkles from the base. "I will send my winds to these invading ships, and they will not reach your shores until the last lights of the sun have set below the horizon. I hope it is enough to aid in driving the invaders from your land," he announces, voice clear and ringing. Stoick clears his throat, and Jack turns to him.
"Berk is in your debt for this kindness, Lord Jack. How may we repay you?"
The entire room collectively holds their breath. This is what they were trying to avoid. They are low on many items. They may not have what he demands. "No need, I'm not charging," Jack says simply. Murmurs roll through the crowd.
I do not understand,"
Stoick stutters, hands almost twitching. Astrid can't remember the last time Stoick stumbled over his words in front of a crowd. She doesn't think there was a last time.
Your son called on me, so it's free,
Jack chirps, turning a smile towards Hiccup. Astrid can see him flush red from all the way over here. Hiccup? Stoick asks in shock, eyes darting over to him. Jack laughs at this, the bells and jewels adorning his neck and wrists chiming along with the sound. Yeah, Hiccup. He gets unlimited favors. He's been very kind to me, Chief. You raised him well. Stoick's eyes widen at this. He just nods, speechless. Jack takes that as answer enough, turning back towards Hiccup. I'll go make sure they're held back. I'll help out wherever else I can, but you guys should start prepping.
Thanks, Jack,
Hiccup says, goofy smile fully in place, face flushed. Oh, no Lord for my troubles? Jack jokes, leaning his face against the staff with a pout. Hiccup laughs.
Berk thanks you, Lord Snowflake.
Jack barks a laugh. He calls out a farewell, and then an errant breeze rockets down from the skylight, nearly extinguishing all the torch posts in the hall, carrying him up and out into the clear skies. Astrid can hear a strong gale begin to blow in from over Berk towards the sea. There's a beat of silence, and then nearly the entire village immediately explodes into talking, quickly turning to yelling, everything aimed solely at Hiccup. Stoick holds his hands up, waving down the crowd.
We have been given precious time by our patron. Let's not waste it,
he bellows.
We will discuss what happened here, after our shores are safe.
He turns to Hiccup, murmuring something lowly. Astrid would bet her last axe that he's saying something along the lines of, We are having a long discussion about why you have unlimited reign to call upon a Vetir. Stoick then lifts himself up into a more imposing figure.
Hiccup,
he says, projecting out so the whole room can hear.
Show us what you have planned.
Just like Jack had said, the raiding ships didn't reach Berk's shorelines until the last light of day had disappeared into the sea of misery. The winds had blown harsh and unrelenting the whole time as they prepped the village for battle. Villagers had to hold each other up at points against the onslaught being whipped out over the cliffs and towards the sea. Jack may have promised against his own storms, but storm clouds settled over Berk all the same. They were carried by the wind from far-off lands, weighed with water and lightning. Everyone had watched their slow advance as they set up their defenses, the rolling thunder booming closer and closer, in time to the flashes seen out in the distance. At least it wasn't snow or hail, something to pierce a way down their storehouse roofs. A little rain and lightning they could handle, it was almost in their blood at this point. It was an advantage in some ways. By the time the sun set, the clouds were a thick enough blanket to block out the moon and stars, covering Berk in a deep darkness. The dragons would be harder to spot in this thick night, Toothless would be impossible, less than a shadow, not even an outline visible to track against the stars. All the children were holed up in the great hall, with 2 guards stationed there as the last line of defense. Hiccup felt, along with everyone else, the sudden cease of the winds howling, and they knew the battle had come. Hiccup managed to sink one of their ships before it even reached the port. Toothless sent him a whisper but for the screech piercing the skies right before death. The fire from that burning ship gave enough light for the others to launch their own counterattacks. The tide was already in Berk's favor, though. They hadn't planned to down one of the ships before it reached the docks. The men from the ships rushed both entrance paths. There they stumbled over bear traps, unsupported stair steps, and other odds and ends that the twins took near maniacal pleasure in implementing. Dragon and men slipped through the shadows, plucking more attackers from their ranks to drop them in the frigid waters below. No flames were cast, their scalene bodies slipping easily back into the night. More invaders slipped on their own over the high winding trails from random ice patches seemingly sprouting from nowhere. It was almost a distraction for the Berkians, who would pause mid-battle to watch as the ice that tripped their enemy would melt right before they stepped foot on it. The whole battle lasted 2 grueling hours, but when it was done and over, the meager remains of the fleet was slinking away on ripped sails, and their home stood standing. It was pouring by then, flashes of lightning a backdrop against their drenched bodies as they screeched in victory up towards the sky, weapons held up stupidly to the thundering heavens. Stoick finds Hiccup again when they are all piled into the great hall, celebrating the victory as they wait out the storm. The doors rattled from the onslaught of rain, the noise drowned out against the drunken music being sung bouncing off the walls. Hiccup was with the rest of the riders, watching Jack's antics in the corner with growing amusement, when suddenly everyone vacates the scene with pitying looks thrown his way. He had been confused until a looming shadow appeared over his shoulder. Stoick stands next to him, tankard in hand.
"Son,"
he says gruffly. Hiccup sighs, slumping his shoulders. Guess that talk is happening now, then.
"Hey, Dad,"
he says, resigned.
"Lord Jack has joined us, I see."
They both look over to where Jack is, in the kids' corner. They had all been chucked off to play with one another while the adults partied. They, in actuality, ended up huddled under one of the corner tables with stern faces, trying to pretend like they were having a serious meeting and not hiding from the thundering booms shaking the doors outside. Jack had taken one look at that sad sight and was gone from Hiccup's sight in an instant. Hiccup didn't mind. He had planned to tuck them all away into a corner anyways, away from wandering eyes that may get the whole room's attention and cause yet another scene. Jack has gotten most of the kids out from under the table, distracting them with his numerous tales. He sat cross-legged on the floor right now, the kids a pile of enraptured faces before him, as he wildly pantomimes his stories, miniature ice figurines of his characters acting out his narration. Hiccup smiles fondly at the sight.
"Yeah, seems fair since you helped out."
There isn't a reply. Hiccup glances over to see Stoick staring at him intently, brows furrowed in thought. That has Hiccup wiping whatever look he has clean off his face, coughing into a hand before staring at some random point on the wall.
"And how long has this been going on?"
Hiccup tenses and glances at Stoick.
"What has been going on?"
Stoick sighs.
"Son, it is obvious you are familiar with one another."
Hiccup flushes, looking away again.
"We met again some time after the shrine was finished, and we kind of just started hanging out every now and then. He hasn't done anything bad to the village, Dad, I swear."
Stoick hums, eyes locked on Jack.
"I'm guessing he's met your other friends."
Hiccup looks back over. Jack's on his feet, waving his staff around, looking like he's regaining some kind of battle. Astrid, Snot-Loud, Fishlegs, and the twins have joined the crowd of kids and are now heckling Jack good-naturedly. He's faced away from them and whips back around before dumping piles of snow on everyone, the kid shrieks of delight reaching Hiccup from across the room. Hiccup chuckles low in his chest.
"Yeah, he helped us out of a tight situation on the edge."
"You fancy him?"
Hiccup chokes, pounding his chest as he starts coughing. He begins sidestepping away. Whatever way this conversation is going, Hiccup wants out.
I think I'm feeling a bit under the weather. I might turn and,
Stoick grasps his shoulders, holding him in place.
"Hiccup, son, please, let me finish."
Hiccup tenses, but sighs, hanging his head with a nod.
"You need to be careful. He is obviously fond of you, too."
"What?"
"I don't want him to decide he wants to keep you one day and steal you away from me."
Hiccup laughs a little shrill.
"Dad, what are you talking about?"
"Hiccup, do you know why taking another Viking's life is so serious?"
Hiccup rubs his temples.
"I have no idea where this is going."
"It's because we only have one, Hiccup."
Stoick soldiers on, not even acknowledging his comment.
"And it's so short and fragile. We're constantly fighting each day to keep it. It has value to us. But to a being with infinite time, we are nothing but bugs. Squash a few here and there and we'll pop right back up again. That value of life isn't the same. Killing, kidnapping, these things are nothing but games to them."
Hiccup huffs.
"Dad, look at him right now and tell me Jack thinks we're nothing more than bugs."
"Son."
"No, I listened. It's my turn. Look."
Stoick shakes his head, grumbling, but does look over. They had started a mini snowball war during their talk. The corner is a makeshift winter wonderland, snow forts and embankments lining the walls. It probably started out as a free-for-all, but it obviously quickly turned into who can actually get Jack. Hiccup knows from experience that it is a tricky game to play. The kids have organized themselves well, though. They are all huddled with the rest of the riders behind one of the fort walls, a young girl no more than 7 as their de facto leader. She suddenly stands up, yelling out a charge, the rest of the group pooling over the walls, running straight for Jack on the other side.
He's standing on top of his snow mound and squats as he holds out his arms to catch the mass of kids that leap at him with battle cries. His fall is dramatic enough to have the twins clapping, cheering out encores in the background, the rest of the riders cackling as Jack lays on the ground, body nearly completely covered in giggling kids as they stuff snow everywhere they can reach. His high, wheezing laughter is loud enough to carry across the room. Hiccup holds out a hand to the scene.
He's been with them all night. He immediately noticed they were scared of the storm and spent his whole night distracting them. He knows them all by name, too, Dad. Half of his visits to Berk are to go play with them, to make sure they're all right. I'm sure you hear about it enough from their parents, but it's really just that.
Stoick crosses his arms, fingers tapping slowly over his forearm. Son, a few months cannot tell you the entire truth of a being like that.
And why not?
Stoick turns to Hiccup. He has told you his age, has he not? Hiccup tenses, but nods. A few months is nothing but a blink for him. He may be amicable, he may be perfect. Then, a few years down the line, there will come to surface things you thought impossible, things you think of as inhumane, immoral. But to them they are reasonable things, reasonable thoughts to have. They live in a different world, with different rules.
Yeah, and his world doesn't want him.
Stoick squints. What do you mean by that, son? Hiccup turns fully towards Stoick, steeling himself.
Dad, you think I don't know that spirits, Vatir, elves, that they can be dangerous? Jack told me himself the other winter spirits see humans as prey, but Jack doesn't. Gods, Dad, he's so full of life. It's like his world just looks at his love for everything, for things like us, and they decide to reject him. And we look at him and just see death and trickery.
Hiccup points towards the corner.
He has spent his centuries in this realm being only greeted with death threats and fear, shown neither sympathy nor compassion. And look at him! Dad, he still cares so much. That's not something you can fake. That's not something that can exist with the cruelty you're talking about. He's not dangerous to us. To me.
Hiccup pants a little after his speech, turning to compose himself. Stoick is still. Then he slowly uncrosses his arms, humming as he turns to look out at the snowy scene with Hiccup. Jack is making a replica snowman of what looks like a badly rendered edition of Snotlout. Snotlout himself stomps around the creation, chewing out every inaccuracy, while Jack floats overhead, cackling. The little menace, Hiccup thinks. He knew what Jack could make, the evidence still sitting on his desk. That lopsided head was in no way an accident. The kids are making their own snowmen, some making snow replicas of their dragons. A few individuals have migrated over from the rafters to sniff at their look-alikes, wiggling happily. Hiccup looks up to where Toothless hangs in a little cocoon at the roof, smiling softly. He said you have shown him great kindness, Stoick murmurs. Hiccup shrugs, looking back at the scene in front of them.
It's something anyone could have done,
he dismisses. Aye, but we didn't. You did. Stoick says, smile twitching, glancing up at Toothless himself. He hums again, low, watching Jack help a little boy with the base of his snow dragon. He has done nothing but help Berk so far. I'll trust you to look after him, son.
Well, I am the head of relations with logistics, or whatever the second thing is pertaining to our patron, after all.
Stoick squints. Hang on a second. So that's why. Hiccup's eyes widen. Shit.
All right, Dad. Good talk. See you later.
Hiccup rushes before speed-walking off. The rest of the village return from their expedition 2 days later. Stoick nearly tackles Gobber, and Hiccup can hear him say something along the lines of "never leave again" before they're off with some of the other village leaders to discuss their position. They repelled the attack, but they still don't know how involved their ally was in said attack. Did they actually need Berk's aid? Did they know about the incoming attack, or did Berk's enemies just anticipate their involvement in the rebuilding? It's something else to keep Hiccup up, and he's not even part of those meetings. He's hammering away late that night in the forge. It's not even something he needs to be working on. He knows he's just procrastinating sleep, putting off having to lay in bed with his thoughts unimpeded, swirling unrelenting in his head as he stares at the ceiling. If he's not going to get any rest, he might as well get something done with all his spare time. Jack sitting with him in compatible silence, a solid presence to his left. He had come when Hiccup was already a few hours in, fully immersed in his tired days in whatever piece of metal he was shaping. Jack took one look at him and just hummed, taking his seat in silence. He still ignores any chair offered, lounging right on the work table. Hiccup mumbles slightly to himself, mouth forming around words that only occasionally slip past his lips, narrowing his glazed eyes at the leather now in front of him. He doesn't even know what he's making at this point, just trusts his hand to move through the motions. He gropes around with one hand for a sewing needle, nearly knocking over some other tools splayed about. He feels cold hands gently turn his hand over before placing a needle in his palm, folding his fingers securely over the base so he doesn't poke himself.
Thanks,
he mumbles, eyes set strained, unseeing on his project. He gets another small hum for that. It takes him 3 tries to thread the coarse wire through the needle, and even more to tie off his first stitch. He's still stumbling through getting the cross-stitch down when he sees Jack's hands come blearily into view and squints. What's he doing? He watches blankly as the needle gets taken from his hands, and then his project gets lifted and placed to the side. By the time he processes everything enough to make an annoyed whine, Jack slips into the spot his project had been, legs bearing Hiccup on either side. His hands come up to cradle his face, those cool fingers rubbing circles right behind his eyes, where he hadn't even noticed a cluster headache forming. He sighs out, slumping in his chair. Some small part in the back of his brain pops up with Stoick's and Ruff's words, with the warmth trapped behind his rib cage like a wild bird. With his indecision, his cowardice. They bounce around like little broken thoughts, not enough energy to string them together. Hiccup doesn't even have the energy to blush, the energy to second-guess the way he falls into Jack's hands. "You should get some sleep, Sugar Plum," he hears vaguely, the voice fuzzy.
Sugar Plum,
he mumbles, cracking open an eye to arch an eyebrow. Jack snickers, fingers smoothing down his hair to rub against his temples. "What, not a fan?"
If you say that in front of the others, I'll never live it down.
"Whatever you say, Hickey." Hiccup snorts.
That's so much worse. Please never say that again. Literally anything but that.
Jack cackles. "Glad to know you're still 70% sass even when you're half asleep." Hiccup rolls his eyes, humming when Jack hits a sore spot, closing his eyes as it's soothed under cool hands. That feels nice. This feels nice. "There a reason you're avoiding sleep?" Jack asks, soft. Hiccup leans against one of those blessed hands, shrugging.
"Too many thoughts,"
is all he can supply, suddenly feeling more drained than he had all day. There's silence, and then the softest of hums picks up, carrying a tilting tune, deep and slow, into the room. It's a siren song, picking him up and gently taking him under the waves. Maybe that's what he is, Hiccup muses, a siren who grew legs, no longer beholden to the sea. But no, he's too at home in the skies, born from the winds, raised from them even. Perhaps something none of them know, something new, something wild and just a little rough around the edges, but still set in front of him, lulling Hiccup with such a soft voice. It gets cut short, though, when Gobber comes hobbling into the forge. Hiccup feels the temperature of those hands shoot down to something almost painful before they jerk back from his head. The lilting melody has ceased too, and Hiccup opens his eyes to see Jack twitching, eyes locked on the entrance. He turns just as Gobber walks through the doorway. The wind must have warned him this time, Hiccup thinks, humming quietly to himself. He can feel the beginnings of a swirling of cool air and leans his elbow on Jack's knee to stop him from dissipating. Jack flicks his forehead and he chuckles.
"Hey, Gobber,"
he calls out. Gobber is rubbing his eyes and throws a wave with a hook.
"Hey, yo, Hiccup.
Should have known you'd be in here in the bloody middle of the night." He finally looks over and stops dead. Hiccup feels Jack's feet begin to twitch, tapping against his shin. Gobber just stares, blinking a few times like Jack will disappear between one moment and the next.
"You haven't met Jack yet, right? I'm sure you heard about his help with the invasion from Dad,"
Hiccup offers lazily, leaning back in his chair. He hides a yawn behind the back of his hand. "Nice to meet you, sir," Jack offers, a little stilted. Gobber lets out a strangled noise, half choking, half laughter.
You calling me, sir? We have a bloody shrine to you at the top of the mountain. Oh, shite, should I be kneeling? Hiccup, stop laughing. I knew you should have been tossed as a babe, you wee devil. Hiccup starts choking from the laughter bubbling out of him. It may be the sleep deprivation, but seeing Gobber stumbling over himself at Jack, of all people, has him in stitches. He feels Jack relax, giggling a little as well. Little snowflakes shake out of his hair from the wiggling, glinting in the low firelight as they twirl around the room. "No need to kneel," Jack says, getting to his feet, "and the shrine really wasn't necessary, though it is quite pretty." He hops onto the ground, taking a few slow steps towards Gobber. He tucks his staff into an armpit, hesitantly holding out a hand. "It's nice to meet you, Gobber. I don't know what you've heard, but I don't kidnap children. Apparently that's a rumor floating around." Gobber guffaws, grasping Jack at the elbow. "Yeah, I didn't believe that yak dung for a second. Odin's above, you cold. Sorry, Lord Jack. Didn't expect that." Jack snickers, flicking some snow at Gobber's chest. "Kind of run cold. And if you're not a sir, I'm certainly not a lord, no matter how amusing that whole thing is." Hiccup crosses his arms over the back of his chair, leaning a cheek against his forearm as he watches them both, smiling. Gobber alternates between ranting about the dangers of Jack walking around barefoot in a lit forge with sharp weapons and hot ore to gleefully asking about all of his ridiculous fairy tales. "Oh, trolls are way more crafty than left socks. They're the ones who stole my shoes, and now I'm forced to forever wander the world without any proper protection for my toes," Jack laments, throwing a hand over his forehead for flair. "I knew they existed. They steal more than socks. What else have those buggers been taking from me?" "Don't believe a thing he says. He's definitely related to Loki," Hiccup says, muffled from where he's smushed against his arm. "What? You've been lying?" Gobber exclaims, eyes narrowing on Jack. Jack cackles. "Only for about half of that," he says, winking, refusing to say which half. He turns to Hiccup. "And I think working on no sleep is a bit more dangerous than not wearing shoes, Hiccup." Hiccup rolls his eyes, but Gobber grumbles in agreement, going to pick up his discarded project. "Aye, I agree with the elf. There's enough dings in this metal to snap it like a twig. Get some rest." "You people really need to pick one thing to call me and stick to it," Jack grumbles, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah, go ahead and give us one then, oh mighty Winter Lord," Hiccup snarks, grinning. "What's the coolest thing in your books?" Jack asks, smiling. "You said you're not a god." "If the benefits are high enough, I wouldn't mind." Hiccup scoffs. "That is not how that works." "No, I've decided. I'm now the god of snowballs. If you ask nicely, I'll make you a god, too. Maybe the god of snarkiness. That fits, right, Gobber?" Gobber rolls his eyes, turning to walk into the other room. "I don't care what you are, as long as you get my sleep-deprived apprentice out of me forge." Hiccup snorts, getting to his feet. He stumbles a bit more than he cares to admit. All right, I'm going." Jack follows him out with a parting shout to Gobber, strolling along leisurely as Hiccup drags his feet back to his house. Gods, he doesn't want to go back to staring at the ceiling. "Want to go flying?" Hiccup asks, tilting his head towards Jack. He just looks at Hiccup with a raised eyebrow, and Hiccup groans. "I'm not going to get any sleep anyways," he says. "I might as well do something other than stare at my ceiling." "What's keeping you up?" Jack asks. Just Hiccup flails a bit. "Just everything. I'm still working out what to do about the new hunter ships, and now we have this whole political explosion happening, and there's so many unknowns. Did our allies know about the attack? How did our enemies know about our movements? Are they going to come back? Why do those hunters want death songs? I can't think of anything. I don't have any answers." Jack hums, leaning into Hiccup's side to steer him around a post. "That does sound complicated, but maybe it'll be a bit easier to think about with a full night's rest." Hiccup just grumbles. He knows Jack's right, but it's not like he's avoiding sleep. He just knows it won't come, so why lay there all night? He glances over and sees Jack looking at him, watching his glower with an amused tilt to his lips. "All right," Jack says. "How about this? You let me give you one bedtime story, and if you're not out, then we can go flying." "Bedtime story? That only works on kids." Hiccup scoffs, stumbling a bit over his foot. The darkness doesn't help his bleary eyes. "Then it shouldn't be a problem for you."
Jack retorts, looking smug. Hiccup can't help but chuckle at that. Those words just promise trouble. That man knows something he doesn't. But he agrees anyways, his brain just slow enough not to stop him from leaning against Jack the whole way home. He makes his way to his room and takes off his shoe and prosthetic, waving off a grumbling Toothless before stumbling into bed. He leans himself up against the headboard and looks over. Jack is standing at the edge of his bed, suddenly looking nervous for all the smack talk he was throwing on the way over. That's not a look he wants on Jack's face, at least not around him. Whatever he may dream of, it doesn't matter if there's still a look like that. This comes first. Hiccup links back the cloud in his brain and slowly holds out a hand. Jack hesitates a moment, then carefully leans his staff against one of the bedposts. He stares at it almost distraught, eyes trained on its form as he takes Hiccup's hand. Hiccup gives him a gentle tug, and he jolts a bit before allowing himself to be pulled onto the bed.
"You can bring the staff too if you want,"
Hiccup says, voice low and groggy, as Jack settles next to him, knees tucked up to his chest. Jack shrinks a bit, shrugging. "I know. I trust you. I just don't really let go of it too often." Hiccup blinks a bit, down at Jack. He's half curled in on himself, tense like he's waiting for questions he doesn't want to answer. That's all right. Hiccup's getting pretty good at waiting. He slowly lowers an arm over his shoulders, careful. Jack puffs out a breath when they settle, and Hiccup traces gentle lines over his shoulder.
"So, what's this magical bedtime story of yours?"
he asks instead. Jack blinks, then snorts, elbowing him. Hiccup wheezes a bit, but chuckles. "Not everything I do is magic, you know," Jack snickers.
"Sure thing, Snowflake."
"Snowflake?"
"What? Seems only fair with all the names you've been calling me." "They're endearing nicknames. You make it sound like I'm heckling you." "Aren't you?"
Jack giggles, poking at Hiccup's side. Hiccup wiggles away, choking back laughter. "You better watch yourself before you lose your bedtime story," Jack threatens.
All right, I see."
Hiccup laughs, settling back in, tucking Jack up against his side. "That's what I thought," Jack says smugly before starting his tale. Hiccup makes it about halfway through, the last thing he remembers being his drooping eyes and dipping head, then a soft cloud of white hair.